This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Our next guest has spent a lot of time helping people with addiction recovery. But what is radically different in terms of what he does is a focus on the family, supporting the family, how the family supports the person who's addicted. And today we're going to talk about building stronger connection with your family members and that person going through addiction. A lot of times we take it for granted that we are family, but are we closely connected? We're going to dig into that and so much more today. He is the man behind Family Addiction Recovery Service. He's got the Family Recovery Solution, does many, many programs, master classes, and so much more to get the message out there and truly put importance on what the family is dealing with. And once they can better support themselves and understand this, they can support that family member who's addicted. Jeff Jones is back with us. How you doing today, Jeff?
Steve, I'm doing really well. I'm excited for this conversation. I'm kind of like following this healing arc of the masterclass I'm doing, and this is kind of the meat of the whole masterclass, which is, building healthier connections with that family member who has the addiction. And so oftentimes it can be where addiction's rules of engagement kind of overrun how families have communicated with one another in the past.
Is it true that even though we are family, like that song Sister Sledge came out in the late 70s, we are family,
yeah,
maybe we're not as connected as we think we may be, and maybe we take it for granted that just because there's a label there, it doesn't mean that we're really deeply connected to each other. Do you think that we assume, many of us in the family situation?
Oh, I think we kind of have to assume that we're family. What I've seen over and over again is addiction, the slow, gradual, incremental process of addiction slowly takes over an individual's brain, their thinking, and specifically their decision making. And then addiction's rules of engagement, have more influence and can take over how a family has done family together, family relationships, how family members have expressed love for one another gets taken over by addiction's rules of engagement. And it's invisible. So it isn't something that people see. And, there's no real clear messaging to help families see this larger picture, so they stay myopically focused on that one person that has the problem and try to help them the best they can. And it's kind of like Albert Einstein's quote, we can't solve a problem with the same thinking that was present when that problem was created.
And how does that go? Repeating the same situation is insanity or something to that effect. I forget how
doing
that
the
goes.
same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That it's
Yeah. So it's a very tense, emotional time when somebody is going through addiction. There's love in the family, so it runs even deeper. Do you find that storm of emotion and frustration can disconnect the family? Now, we're talking about, building a better connection today, but do you find that invariably disconnects the family and they're the problem or challenge begins?
Oh gosh. Well, I know that for myself, it has been helpful to change my own thinking, and that's what I encourage family members to do. And so I use the language addictions rules of engagement because rules of engagement is the military term that means at what point will we use force? And addiction, it uses force whenever it wants to, however it wants to get what it wants, however it wants. And the family, the unsuspecting family, is, kind of using the same way they are connected, the same kind of loving and trusting that their same way of loving is the very best they can do.
How do you reconnect? You were family. Everything was
Yeah,
cool. For the
yeah.
most part. By the way, side note, anybody ever says, "My family's great. We never have any issue," you're lying. You're lying. You're lying to yourself, you're lying to others. All families got something somehow at some point, even if it's minimal. Some families have more challenges, but you're a family. You are connected. There is love there. This addiction situation presents. Maybe it was slow rolling and then escalated. Now there is, whether you realize it or not, a little bit of a disconnect. How do you reconnect?
Yeah. Well, one of the very first things that is helpful, and I think in previous conversations I've mentioned this, but just recognize for family members to recognize what's happening in their own body and use their body as a GPS kind of thing. And by that, I mean when emotions start to escalate, they can easily get triggered. Their nervous system can get activated. And the more that they can keep their nervous system calm, the more that they will have maximum capacity in their own brain to make good decisions to reconnect. And how they reconnect is to recognize, you know, what's going on. That addiction is leading the show, and this old way of loving, this old way of connecting is not going to work because I've tried it over and over again and it hasn't worked yet, kind of thing. So, coming up with new strategies is really helpful. And I think I've also mentioned on the show prior times, one of the first one is, changing a reaction to a response.
Can you
And that,
define that just for those of us may have missed that, and just a better understanding of it?
yeah, yeah. So, um, changing a reaction to a response is recognizing in our own body that our nervous system just jumped up when something happened. And the very first thing we need to do is to calm our nervous system. And oftentimes, when our nervous system escalates, it's about we don't feel safe. And so we want to do something immediate so we can feel safe or we can help someone else feel safe. But we can really only control ourselves. We can't control
Mm,
them. So, one of the hardest things in the world is to discern between what we can control, our body, regulating our nervous system, and what we can't control. And that is the other person. And here's one of the big keys I would love for your listeners to be able to take away, and that is when they can calm their own body, then they are the calmest nervous system in the room, and other people in the family, other people around them have the ability to lower their own nervous system. I say have the ability. It isn't like this is a conscious thing. It isn't like I, I can think my nervous system to calm down. It doesn't work like that. But when someone else has a calm nervous system, unconsciously other people's nervous system can co-regulate off of that calm nervous system.
I mean, it's understandable when somebody is going through addiction, somebody you love in your family, and now something presented, whatever it may be, they're using again, or there's something popped up, like what?
Yeah.
That you, I hate to use the word triggered, but you got triggered. Like, what? Wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what you just said before is very universal, and so key here is you can only control what you can control. You love that person, you're frustrated, you're sad, you're emotional. It's taking its toll on you and the family, but you can't control it. You can only do so much. And maybe as it comes to that point of realization where you have to say, I'm doing everything I can. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, why I'm doing what I'm doing is because the mainstream message, or what I consider the mainstream message, comes from the group Al-Anon, which gives the message that the families are powerless, that they can't do anything. Well, the only thing they can do is detach with love. And I want to say that detaching with love can be helpful. It is not a long-term solution. It is a short-term solution. And if someone detaches with love, with, the energy of, adversarial, I'm hurt, it's your fault, or aggression kind of energy, that type of, detaching, it just is, it doesn't create the environment to build healthy relationships. It creates the environment to continue to divide.
How do you pilot when you know you can't do any more for that person? I mean, let's say it's
Yeah,
a child, one of your kids.
yeah,
And it's just, this has been going on now for quite some time. You've seen
yeah,
it percolate as it escalates. Now it percolates, and now you're at wit's end.
yeah. So the first thing that I want to say is before you're at your wit's end, you are going to have so much more capacity to change within yourself and change the environment around you. So that I just want to preface it. But once someone is at their wit's end, specifically with a child, one of the things I think that can be the most helpful is for their self-talk to actually do something very similar to what you said, Steve, is to accept I've done everything I can here. And so I am driven to this next choice, which this next choice could be hire an interventionist, kind of if the child is under 18 years old or whatever the state that someone is in, says where parents have the responsibility for a child, they can have them go to like a wilderness program.
Mm.
And with that same thinking, that was self-talk, say it out loud, child, you left me no choice. So yes, at 2 o'clock in the morning last weekend, someone came into the home, they woke you up, they took you out of your bed and whisk you off to this wilderness treatment program. That's kind of what happens. And
Mm.
it's like you left me no choice. I was scared for you. I want to help you. I love you. I do not just want to sit by idly and do nothing. And so this was my choice.
Mm. I want to add to that nobody is immune from this. And that story that you just shared was shared for the first time ever by David Bowie's daughter very recently. And he passed about 10 years ago. Well, she's in her 20s now. When she was in her teens, that's what happened. Now, he's got endless supply of money at that time with his wife, Iman. And you got to believe that they could have done pretty much anything in terms of treatment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, short of their daughter going to what you just described.
Yeah.
But they must have been at the end of their rope. They had no other choice, and that's what transpired. And she's sharing that story now, maybe to help others, maybe out of her frustration. She apparently is doing okay now. But my point here is, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter
Right.
how close your
Yeah.
family is. You're gonna have these challenges. Do you feel, Jeff, that there's always an answer? There's always a solution. Might not be the one you want, might not be the
Uh,
one the other person wants, the person who's
yeah.
addicted, but you always have a choice. How you
Yeah.
react to that's a choice.
Yeah, I want to say yes. I believe that family members always have multiple possibilities, not just this or that. I believe there's always a third choice, but rarely are they going to see it because, we are pretty much indoctrinated our thinking with black or white kind of thing. So there is always a choice. And I know that when I have conversations with people and I start to comprehend what has happened in the past, what has led up to where they're at now, there is always a choice from cutting them off. Like, and it may be a choice that you don't want to hear. Very likely, it may be a choice you don't want to hear. But Steve, to circle back and reflect on the story you just told about David Bowie's daughter, I love stories like that. People that are very well known, them, becoming more transparent about their own life. And another story I remember, and now this woman she was a woman, she was not a girl. So her parents couldn't, help her in the same way, was the Amy Winehouse story.
Mm.
And the family, from what I understand about that, and I think there's a movie about it, the dad, pretty much drove her to succeed more and more and just do more and more and more shows.
Yep.
And she was a star. I mean, she was a wonderful musician, and it was quite obvious to everyone that addiction was at play and contributed to her death.
And guess what? One of her biggest songs, what was it called? Rehab.
I don't want to go to rehab. Yeah, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Like it's, what is that? Art imitates life.
Yeah,
But this is all of us are not immune to it. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity with bazillions of dollars or not. Um, it doesn't make it any easier. And just
right.
that, especially when it's a loved one, that's the biggest challenge. What about what about the guilt? Like you said before, and that's what sparked my thought. As you trace the steps back that led up to maybe the escalation of the addiction, I remember when they were only 12 and they were stuck
Yeah,
on
yeah.
cigarettes, and that was then, and I allowed that one cigarette, blah blah blah. How do you get over the guilt?
Well, there's no one way to get over the guilt, but guilt can be very helpful from the standpoint of, when we understand the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is I made a mistake. Shame is I am a mistake. And so by understanding that I made a mistake, I'm accepting the fact that I am like any other human that can make mistakes. And when I make a mistake, there's a way for me to repair it.
Interesting way to look at it. And it's often said, if you look at energetic vibration, the highest vibration is love, joy, of course, just below that, happiness. The lowest vibration energetically is shame. Wow.
Yeah, and so I mean, and you've probably heard me say this before, but when I work with family members, it's a transformational process for them, not for their loved one with the addiction. There's no guarantee about that, but I can come much closer to a guarantee that if people are willing to do the the work in the coaching relationship that I offer, they are going to go through a transformation, largely from what you like, why, from what you just said.
Nobody does what you do. I've yet to find anybody that focuses on the family, but that person who's addicted, they have family. That's their support system. Yeah, friends, of course, but family is family. But the family's usually not supported.
So what I wanted to slip in here is our traditional addiction and recovery thinking, and it's all about, we just need to hire an interventionist, and there's a huge range of kinds of interventionists, but I know of interventionists who have done this process with the family and the person who has the addiction, and they have not gone into treatment, and the interventionist encourages the family to have boundaries and with consequences like, if you do not go to treatment, you are never welcome in my house again. You will never see my children again. And it's essentially dividing and then what, and this doesn't happen all the time. And of course, this never is on the news, but there have been people who they end their life after something like that because their family has followed the quote unquote best thinking out there by an interventionist. And I remember, being in this room, and this dad was talking about he eventually tried tough love with his son, and then he said his son committed suicide, and the dad was there, and he was saying, right after that, I was asking myself, was my love tough enough?
Wow. What a question. And what ensues after that? Potentially guilt. Builds up again.
Yes,
thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. That's your website, right?
yes.
Yeah. Thank you for what you do in a different way of supporting addiction challenges. And, the family, they say, is the rock. We have to make sure the rock is rock solid. Because sometimes, with all the emotions and everything that ensues, that can get a little bit challenging. Thank you so much for being here today and all the insight. Jeff, I really appreciate it.
Sure, you are welcome. One last thing, Steve.
Sure.
Saturdays at noon Eastern time, I am, doing this masterclass. It's free. People can still sign up, and they'll see the last part of it.
Beautiful. And that's just a piece of the support that you offer at thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. We'll catch up next time. Thank you again.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.